This graph maps the relationship between net worth and human integrity. For most, character remains steady regardless of income, but at the furthest edge of the wealth axis, the data reveals a pattern. As assets peak, metrics for empathy and ethics drop toward zero. To see how this pattern plays out in a single life, we have to look at a farmer named Ramu. He spent his days between his fields and the river, living a life defined by physical labor. He and his wife, Sukumari, lived in poverty, but their home was anchored by a consistent sense of mutual support. That foundation was tested when a seasonal storm turned into a catastrophic flood. In a single afternoon, the river rose and swept through Ramu's fields, physically tearing his crops from the earth and destroying months of survival-level labor. Ramu's response to the loss wasn't despair. While the village was still underwater, he took his nets to the very current that had ruined his farm and pulled enough fish from the floodwaters to feed his family for the night. As they ate that meal in their damaged home, the crisis didn't push them apart. It forced a level of cooperation and shared resolve that made their relationship feel more secure than it had during times of plenty. Humans are remarkably efficient at surviving tragedy. When we lose our resources, we instinctively prioritize our connections to others. The real threat to the soul isn't the presence of a struggle, it's the total removal of it. Following the flood, a stranger approached Ramu with a specific proposal. He didn't offer a loan, he offered a system, a set of agricultural instructions that treated farming as a predictable calculation rather than a gamble. The formula relied on 3 specific variables. By adjusting planting dates, water allocation, and crop selection, output could be multiplied. Ramu followed the instructions exactly. The resulting harvest flooded the market, generating unprecedented profit in a single season. He used that initial capital to buy the surrounding farms. He replaced traditional hand tools with heavy industrial equipment, rapidly scaling the stranger's exact formula across hundreds of acres. Within a few years, the small hut was gone. Ramu moved into a sprawling stone palace, surrounding himself with servants, high walls, and the physical markers of success. Ramu had mastered the mechanics of wealth, but he hadn't prepared for the psychological weight of it. He had a formula for profit, but no framework for how to live once the profit arrived. We can call this the success paradox. It's a transition where the qualities that helped a person survive poverty, like humility and communal reliance, are discarded. As Ramu became wealthy, his personality began to completely mirror his swelling bank account. He became dismissive toward the village fishermen and used his financial leverage to force his neighbors into unfavorable contracts. This dismissive behavior eventually entered the walls of his own home. He treated Sukumari more like an employee than a partner, snapping at her for minor inconveniences and disregarding her presence. The actual attribution of his success was a 3-way split between the stranger's system, Sukumari's support, and his own labor. But Ramu rewrote this history. He erased the external help, convincing himself that his palace was the result of his individual brilliance alone. By every traditional metric, Ramu was the most successful person in the region, but his sprawling house was entirely silent. He had traded his social connections for a series of high-walled enclosures. The ego had convinced him that because he no longer needed the villagers' help to survive, he no longer needed their respect or their company. Years later, the stranger returned to the palace. He didn't ask about crops or land. He sat across from Ramu and asked a single question: "Are you happy?" Ramu laughed, gesturing to the gold leaf on the walls and servants in the hall. But the stranger looked past the decor and pointed to the gates. He noted Ramu had every coin in the village, but no one left to talk to. He told Ramu he had traded his pulse for a ledger. When the stranger left, the silence in the palace became heavy. Ramu stood before his mirror and realized that if he lost his money tomorrow, there wasn't a single person in the village who would offer him a meal or a place to sleep. He was the richest man in the province and the most isolated. He found Sukumari in the courtyard. Looking at her, he remembered the night of the flood, the taste of the fish, the warmth of the small fire, and the way they had laughed despite losing everything. The contrast between that memory and his current coldness was enough to break his posture. He sat beside her and apologized, admitting that the money had made him forget how to be a person. Sukumari didn't celebrate his breakdown. She simply noted that while many people can survive a disaster, very few can survive a fortune without losing their way. The final test of character isn't how you handle the flood, it's how you handle the harvest. True victory isn't achieving a certain net worth, it's maintaining the humility and gratitude that you had when you had nothing at all.